Separating the fact from the fiction and the Baba Mises from the bottom line. You're listening to the Rabbi and the CEO. I'm Rabbi Dovid Vigler of Chabad Palm Beach Gardens. Mitch Zachary is the CEO of Zachary Financial Consultants. And today we are talking about the spiritual journey of an agnostic Jew. We've been doing this radio show on the Sunday Shmooze radio show, together as a powerful team.
The CEO and the rabbi for 9 years.
For 9 years. What a journey it's been.
Let me tell you, there's probably very few viewers or listeners that know we can go back that far. So you have no idea how far I've come.
I remember when I first met you, Mitch, you were, what? A rabbi?
And
a rabbi in my office?
I wasn't just a yes man.
What does the rabbi want from me? And I remember, I don't know where I got inspired to ask you, why don't you join me on the radio? I remember what actually inspired me.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Go for it, Mitch.
Okay, here's a funny story. So the first time I do the radio show with the rabbi, about 9 years ago, we were talking about, as I recall, something having to do with Iran and Israel. Okay? We were talking about it kind of like a Farbrengen at the shul on Shabbos. Mm-hmm. And you said to me, hey, Mitch, why not come to the radio show and we'll talk about it on the radio?
Oh, that's where it started. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's good. Okay.
This is the funny part, though.
Okay, I'm with you.
We get into it, and I'm explaining my few views on Israel and Iran, and we get a caller, and I'm like, great, because we were doing calls at that time. We had open mic.
Live calls, right?
And I'm like, great, we got a caller. Well, it was some elderly lady calling to say she wanted the rabbi to go back to just sermonizing. And what was I doing on the show?
Who is this imposter on the show, right?
That was like 15 minutes into my first show with you.
Your first 15 minutes of fame, right? Well, I'm glad you stuck it out, Mitch, because what we ended up doing was truly a spiritual journey of an agnostic Jew. And that was a term that you yourself gave yourself a few minutes ago as you came up with this term. Because where we started out, Mitch, you were in a place, I wouldn't call it atheist.
No.
You don't have a problem with God. It's just that God wasn't such a big deal in your life.
It wasn't part of it. God was not a part of my life.
Wasn't a major
Judaism
component.
Wasn't really a part of my life. I was Jewish.
But you were proudly
Jewish.
Not observantly Jewish in any way.
No, we had many traditions we followed. The separating milk and meat at home, going to shul on the high holidays. There were certain things that we followed, but not knowing why. Just that they were traditions. And we did that. We didn't like the candles. Honestly, we didn't like candles on Friday night. I didn't go to shul on Shabbos. We did very little. We did the minimal. But honestly, Rabbi, probably we were doing what the majority of American Jews do.
Exactly what many of our listeners right now are holding right now. They're just Jewish and not much passion in terms of the ritual. Not much passion in terms of the observance. They're just going with the motions. It's Yom Kippur. We'll go to synagogue. Right? It's Pesach. We'll eat the matzah. We'll have a seder. Maybe a shorter seder.
Read from the Haggadah.
Yeah, you go through the motions.
What it actually means, and we'll read from.
And I think the key here was, Mitch, when you said something about not knowing why. And my role as a rabbi, as a Chabad rabbi, Chabad means logic, wisdom, understanding, and realization. Chabad is about logic. It's a relentless intellectual attack on faith, to understand why we do what we do in order to power our passion. Mm-hmm. Because when you understand why something is important, it gets a whole new meaning. It's not something which you feel guilty about. It's something which you actually look forward to doing. And that's how I hope is how our relationship, at least on a spiritual level, has been able to develop at least part of our relationship. I mean, it's very, very deep in many, many different ways. But what we'd like to talk about today, as we are preparing to transition from the radio onto social media, where our shows continue, we're evolving into the new generation, into the new era. We're moving the Shmooze Radio to the Facebook and YouTube. Please subscribe to facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. That's facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. Also on YouTube, it's youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. Again, youtube.com/Jewish Gardens, where we have constant content coming in, a lot of dynamic, interactive learning, lots of interesting guests and presentations. And we hope that you'll join us on YouTube at youtube.com/Jewish Gardens and facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. But what we'd like to talk about today, as we say farewell to 9 years on the radio until we return one day, is Mitch's journey, the spiritual journey of an agnostic Jew. Mitch, how can you identify the turning points, the junctions in your journey, inspirational moments that have led you from where you were to where you are today? Share with us some thoughts.
Well, the first step, and this was a big step for me, is what Rabbi will recall, was me agreeing to go to shul on Shabbos. That was like, no, I don't do shul on Shabbos.
I remember that. I had to be creative in my marketing, right?
Fortunately, my son said he'll go with me, so I didn't go alone. The point being that I never looked at the Torah in its true meaning. I always looked at the Torah as that boring part of the service where they just read it in Hebrew. And, that would be a good time to zone out, honestly, when I was in shul.
It didn't speak to you at all.
At all. And I think once I started to read the Torah in English, not following along in Hebrew, and let's face it, Rabbi, you do it so fast in Hebrew, it's almost impossible for people like myself to follow you.
Fair enough. Agreed. Granted.
Which is fine because it speeds it up.
Otherwise you'd be there all day. So
that's fine.
You'll pick your poison, right?
But when I started reading in English, and let's face it, not every portion of the Torah is as relevant as other portions, varying degrees. However, your sermons, where you would interpret what we just read into modern day relevance, got me thinking. Well, here's a 3,000-year-old document that had an impact on my life. And there were so many times, Rabbi, where you would read a portion, you'd interpret it, and I would go, that relates to an event that happened to me this past week at work.
Wow. Now we're talking.
Now I understand why I reacted a certain way, or why somebody else reacted a certain way, why something bothered me and it shouldn't bother me. And that's when I realized, wow, you really can learn from a 3,000-year-old document. It's not just parchment rolled up. There's importance in there.
The key here is that this isn't just another document. You're talking about a document that was written by God Almighty. And when you realize that this isn't just another book, but it's a book written by God, it's literally God's gift to mankind, then what happens is that it suddenly dawns upon you that God is timeless, God is all-knowing, and God didn't just write a document for a generation of
to fill pages in a scroll.
Exactly. He wrote a timeless document that would be relevant to every person in every location and in every struggle. You just need a shepherd, a good rabbi that's able to help you open your eyes and see the horizons that are under your nose, to help you realize that what looks archaic, what seems irrelevant, with the right glasses, actually becomes something meaningful. And that's an extraordinary metamorphosis that we've experienced together.
Well, and I just, so you understand, Rabbi, and we've talked about this many times, is the American Jewish experience of the majority, I feel pretty comfortable saying, the majority of American secular Jews, is all about the bar mitzvah. Okay, learn some prayers in Hebrew school, learn our history, learn our traditions, learn how to speak Hebrew and read Hebrew. Let's say not speak it, but read it.
Learn the how.
And then get bar mitzvah or have your children get bar mitzvah. Done. Like, it's as if that was your college graduation from Judaism. And you've shown me how that's just the start. That's the kindergarten graduation.
Exactly.
That's not the college graduation. It's the kindergarten graduation. And so my education and knowledge was, say, at the kindergarten level. Now I'm in maybe high school level, maybe freshman high school level.
Right.
I have a long way to go.
Absolutely. I think you're doing great. So this has really been our journey in the ability to reinvent our Hebrew school education. And in many cases, for many of our listeners, it's a lack of Hebrew school education. Their parents couldn't even afford to send them to Hebrew school, to give them a bar mitzvah. And in many cases, members of our community are those that vowed never to set foot in a temple, the day after their bar and bar mitzvahs.
Absolutely.
So our role is to rehabilitate disenchanted Jews and
Re-educate.
Exactly. Rehabilitate is a strong word, right?
Yeah.
So re-educate, re-inspire, and reinvigorate to make it more meaningful, not just to learn how you do it, but to learn why you do it. Now, along this journey, and if you just tuned in, you're listening to the Rabbi and the CEO. I'm Rabbi Dovid Vigler. The CEO is Mitch Zachary of Zachary Financial Consultants. And together, we've been running this radio show for 9 years, live every single Sunday. I don't think we missed
Very few.
very, very few. If we ever did a few reruns. Yeah, when there's a holiday. But we were very dedicated. We did live shows from Israel, from the Golan Heights, from the Sfata, just crazy places that we did this from. And it's been such an incredible journey, what you called, Mitch, the spiritual journey of an agnostic Jew. And we're going to be talking about interesting places along the spiritual journey of an agnostic Jew, life-changing points of the spiritual journey of an agnostic Jew coming up right now. We are talking about the first of those points, which is at least 3 points that we're going to be covering today. 3 points, junction points, that really guided your spiritual journey. And one of them was very surprising and unexpected. It was actually inside the synagogue. Yes. It was during the Torah reading service of the synagogue. But I was
reluctant to attend.
Yeah, and that you'd been to 1,000 times
fact,
before.
To our listeners, the only way he got me to go was he promised me good kosher food and a lot of vodka.
Well,
a lot of less wine.
You got to get it. You got to get in there somehow. So we got your attention, Mitch. And the first of the 3 steps of the 3 steps we're going to be discussing today of the spiritual journey of an agnostic Jew is surprising and unexpected. It's actually in the sanctuary where Mitch, who's very level-headed, down to earth, salt of the earth kind of guy, was able to open the Torah with an open mind. And instead of saying, who needs this stuff? This is backward. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand. With an open mind, he said, what is this actually talking about?
In English and not just trying to follow you speed racing around in Hebrew.
But Mitch, you were open to new ideas. When I opened up with ideas from my Rebbe, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
I didn't even know who the Rebbe was.
And when I was able to be the Rebbe's man to Palm Beach Gardens and share the teachings of the Rebbe, you were like, wow, your soul caught fire.
I loved it. Well, I've read every book about the Rebbe that's available.
That's right. Well, you're just getting warmed up. There's a lot more out there. Kindergarten graduation. We're all on a journey, Mitch, right? But let's talk about 2 more very inspiring points, junction points in the spiritual journey of an agnostic Jew. Where else did you feel, Mitch, that you felt
So a couple of years into it, I was joining you at the annual meeting of the Chabad Rabbi, international meeting of the Chabad Rabbis.
International convention.
We land in JFK, and the rabbi goes, Mitch, before we go there, right? It's right here near the airport. Let's go to the Rebbe's Ohel.
The Ohel.
Which you should explain what the Ohel is.
So the Ohel, for our listeners, the Ohel is the resting place of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He is the Rebbe, the leader of the Chabad worldwide movement, the most influential Jewish leader, certainly of our generation, and more than likely of the past few hundred years for sure. No one else influenced as many Jewish people.
And the future, a couple hundred years maybe.
More than likely. The Rebbe was certainly the most influential Jew of our times, and he passed away just today, the 3rd day of Tammuz, 26 years ago. The 3rd day of Tammuz, 26 years ago in the Hebrew calendar.
About him now than when he died. Probably.
Fascinating, right? It's an interesting observation there. And the Rebbe's buried very close to JFK Airport in Queens, in a place called Cambria Heights. There's a cemetery many of our listeners might know, the Old Montefiore Cemetery in Queens, New York. Used to be a very sleepy, quiet neighborhood. Suddenly, in 1994, on one summer day, became one of the busiest and most visited places in New York City, as thousands and thousands and thousands of Chabadniks and Hasidim and religious Jews and non-religious Jews, celebrities, whites and blacks, Jews and Christians, Catholics, Muslims, come from all over the world to pray to God at the resting place of this holy man of the Rebbe. And that's what Mitch is talking about, the second of 3 game-changing or life-changing points in his spiritual journey of the agnostic Jew was your visit to the Rebbe's Ohel. So tell us about it. What did you experience?
Well, when we first got there, just so our listeners understand, I was still I was uncomfortable. Never been there before. The first thing the rabbi says to me is, listen, before we go in here, I'm going to go to the mikveh. Do you want to join me?
Do you want to join me in the mikveh?
I said, no, I'm not ready for that. That's a step behind.
The mikveh for our listeners is a ritual bath where you go and you go like
you purify yourself.
You purify yourself. It's a spiritual bath, and I don't think you were ready for that.
I wasn't ready for that. You got me there in Israel, but not at that time. I wasn't ready for that, and so I was like, well, what do I do? And you go there. It is a little intimidating because everybody's got to fill in the talis and praying, And the rabbi said, look, sit here at a desk. There was many desks. Take some paper, pencil. Write down your wishes for you, for your family, for the future. Just jot down a few notes. Well, he went into the mikvah and left me. I had 4 full both side pages filled out. Because when you're really focused,
who knew that you didn't realize that you had that much in your heart?
I was just like, don't leave me here alone for too long, all right? But when you really start to think about it, you think of each of your family members, you think about their problems, and you think about your concerns, and you write it down, and you say, God, I hope this family member can overcome this hurdle, and I hope they can get past this. Before you know it, if you cover everybody you care about, like I said, I put 4 both sides pages of thoughts and wishes. And what that did for me is it gave me a starting point for creating my priorities, for creating true family goals, true what's really important. We all have financial, and I certainly have had financial goals and career objectives. But how often do you really sit and think about each of your loved family members and say, okay, what do I wish for them? And that was cathartic for me. It really was. Because from that point
I remember
forward,
it took you time. You were not ready to ask for anything for yourself.
Right.
And I remember at that meeting,
you
did. There was one thing you did.
Yeah, there was
very
one thing.
private.
There was one thing. It's personal.
We're not going to talk about it now.
There was one personal thing. Yes, there was one.
And I remember it was very hard for you to ask for yourself.
And it all worked out. That personal thing all worked out.
Mitch,
you were positive.
Mitch, I want to tell you, I have that voicemail.
For that coming year, it was November 13.
I have that
and
voicemail.
For 14, I had a terrible feeling of bad things happening.
Yeah, I mean, without getting into the details here on public radio, but there was something that you were struggling with, something that was very concerning to you. And I still have the voicemail when you called me back.
The end of 14.
At the end of the period that you were concerned about, and you said, the Rebbe came through for me. The Rebbe came through for me.
Yeah.
It was the first time I felt there was such an enlightened moment for you, where you felt that there was a light at the end of the tunnel. You were very fatalistic until that moment. You were like, whatever will be, will be. People live, people die. Good things happen, bad things happen. Whatever, you just got to be on the right side of the luck of the draw, right? And it was that at that moment that I felt in your spiritual journey, having emerged from the Ohel, the Rebbe's Ohel, having asked the Rebbe to pray to God on your behalf, and having seen a blessing that you felt was impossible, for that blessing to come true, I felt was a life-changing moment on your journey.
Question. And I just want to say that over time, not immediately, but over time, virtually every single of the wishes and hopes that I wrote down has come to pass.
Now that's a revelation to me. I did not know that.
Yeah, and not, some happened that year, some took 5 or 6 years. But it was important to me, every single thing I wrote, and to tell you the truth, I can almost tell you everything I wrote right now.
Wow.
Because I didn't stop thinking about it. Once I wrote it down, every time I look at a family member that I wrote something for, I think about what I wrote down for them.
Wow.
And when I talk to them, I try to see how far along are they in reaching what I was hoping that they would get.
Now your letter was private. I'm only
Right.
your rabbi, but I'm not your. I would never ask you to divulge. And I'm so thrilled to hear that all the things that you asked for were
Pretty much
fulfilled.
have happened.
If you've just tuned in, you're listening to the Rabbi and the CEO, Mitch Zachary. He's the CEO of Zachary Financial Consultants. I'm Rabbi Dovid Vigler of Chabad Palm Beach Gardens. And together, we are the Rabbi and the CEO for 9 years. Every single Sunday, we have been broadcasting radio, Shmooze Radio, on talking about, the Jewish views on the news and separating the fact from the fiction and the Baba Mises from the bottom line. We're now evolving into the new frontier. We're moving into social media, and we ask you to join us on YouTube, to subscribe to our channel at youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. Just go to youtube.com/Jewish Gardens and click on the big red subscribe button. That's all you need to do. And if you're really brave, you'll click the little bell over there to get a notification of every time that we have uploaded a new video, which is pretty often. It's about once a day. So if you subscribe to us at youtube.com/Jewish Gardens, just push that big red subscribe button and friend us on Facebook. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. That's facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. We're talking today about the spiritual journeys of an agnostic Jew. We're talking about Mitch's spiritual journeys. We've spoken about 2 of 3 of his life-changing points in his spiritual journey. A Jew that said, it could never.
When we first started, I remember distinctly how I felt, and I said it on the radio. I wasn't shy about it. I wasn't patronizing to you. I said I didn't believe in the grand scheme of things. I didn't believe in the master plan. Everything goes in accordance with God's wishes. I believe life was full of chaos, coincidence, and confusion.
Chaos, coincidence, and confusion. That sounds just right. Yep, I remember that.
That's how I felt. And now I do feel like everything that happens is God's will.
Mitch, and I'm so honored to be your rabbi throughout this entire process. I'm honored to be your friend. I'm honored to be your rabbi, that I'm able to teach you like you are able to teach me in your expertise and as the CEO. It's been such a meaningful and amazing journey that's going to live with me for the rest of my life and on to the next world as well. I cherish our bond. I cherish our relationship and our friendship. It means so much to me to see how you've been able not to change, but to discover your own soul, to discover your own organic.
It's a personal journey.
Exactly. To help you discover your own Jewish connection, your own organic being as a Jew, as a son of God, as a member of our people. And 2 of those 3 game-changing, life-changing points. The first one you spoke about was inside the synagogue, reading from the Torah in English. They're following the Torah portion in English every Saturday morning, which you still do religiously, despite the challenges right now of the coronavirus. And then the second point was the visit to the Ohel, to the Rebbe's Ohel, the Rebbe's resting place in Queens. And I want to encourage our viewers and listeners to actually log online to ohelchabad.org. It's ohelchabad.org. That's OHELCHABAD. ohelchabad.org, where you can actually send a letter right now to the Rebbe, to send a letter to the Rebbe to pray to God on your behalf. Extraordinary miracles have happened, friend. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Let me tell you, you can read up about the Rebbe over there. You can read up about the Ohel at ohelchabad.org. That's OHELCHABAD.org. And you can always email me for more insight and more thoughts and reflections. Please send me an email to rabbi@jewishgardens.com. That's rabbi@jewishgardens.com. And now, Mitch, the final of the 3 life-changing points in your spiritual journey.
So within a year or 2, about a year and a half after our venture to the Ohel, you took me on my first trip to Israel. And I don't know if going to Israel was on my radar. That seemed like a bridge too far in the sense that it's a big trip and, what would I do there and what did I really want to see? And I wasn't into just going there to say I was there, What's the point of that? So it was a wonderful trip. But the most meaningful part of the trip for me was my first trip. It was without you. I went with another of our members.
It was on the same trip, just a few days before we started the official trip.
Because our hotel was walking distance from there.
Right.
And I talked to another member who was with us, and he hadn't been there ever before either. And we said, listen, let's just wake up early, bring our tefillin and our talis, and let's just check it out. And we had to find it, and everything.
You made your way. You searched your way to the Western Wall.
You go through the Muslim quarter.
With your tefillin.
And when you actually touch the kotel, the wall, the Western Wall for the first time, it felt to me like I was connecting with all my past Jewish generations. It felt like everything that had happened in my life, and maybe even in the lives of some of my ancestors, led to that point where I could get connected through to all of my past ancestors just by touching that wall. And I know several people who were on that trip felt the same way. The member who was with me felt the same way. And all of a sudden, you know you belong to something. As soon as you touch that wall, you know you're a part of many thousands of years of history that you continued, you followed through, taught your children, you were taught by your parents or grandparents and their parents, and you're a part of something so big that it changes you forever.
When you touched that wall,
because you're connecting with something that was put up thousands of years ago by Jews, for Jews.
Your ancestors.
Yes.
In fact, you're named Mitch Zachary.
Zachary.
After the prophet Zachary who walked those walls.
Mm-hmm. There's a quote in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
In the old city.
Of his prophecy, right?
Yeah.
About the rebuilding of Jerusalem. When you touched that wall, you touched your soul.
Absolutely.
And your soul was awakened from its slumber. We all experience unconsciousness, soulful unconsciousness. And it was your experience at the Western Wall, at the Kotel, the holy Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, that you felt a sense, a very unexpected, very unexpected sense of inspiration.
It's like when you have a baby for the first time.
You're expecting something.
And nobody can tell you what it's really like until you have it. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, but I remember you came in very skeptical to the Western Wall. You were like, yeah, whatever. It's not going to be
the whole trip.
You weren't expecting any life-changing.
Israel is more of a political matter. As me trying.
Yeah, I remember you were very concerned about the political.
Why do we have
geopolitics? Right.
And why can't we just straighten it out?
You came in on a political journey. You left on a spiritual journey.
No question.
Which is something so beautiful, Mitch. What a great story you shared there with us. Thank you for sharing that beautiful journey with us.
My pleasure.
The spiritual journey of an agnostic Jew as we wrap up 9 years of a journey of a Jew just like you, who said that you said chaos, confusion, and coincidence. That's what life is all about. And slowly but surely, through these 3 points that we've identified today, through the reading of the Torah in English every Shabbat morning, through the visit to the Rebbe's resting place in Queens, New York, and to the visit at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, you were able to inspire your soul to realize that you belong. You belong to something so much bigger and so much greater, that you were chosen for greatness, that you matter, that you're important, and yet your choices are meaningful. And that's what was able to bring you here today. I'm so excited to see where you go from here, Mitch, Well, what the next chapter...
Hopefully the journey continues.
Of course it does. You're dynamic. You're alive. The journey only ends when we're 6 foot under. I'm excited to see, because you know what? You just said it yourself. You said what you thought was the graduation from Judaism, you discovered was the graduation from kindergarten. Yeah. But now, you said it yourself. This may be his high school graduation, right? We're moving on from 9 years of radio. We're moving into social media. I think we're getting ready for college.
I hope so.
This is going to be maybe we're going to yeshiva, right? This could be very exciting.
Well, it's been great, Rabbi.
Mitch,
thank you very much.
Closing comment on the radio here after 9 years. How do you sum up 9 years on the radio?
What I like the most about it gave me an opportunity to spend an hour with you every week and learn from you one-on-one. Even though I don't know how many thousand people listen, for me it was a personal benefit that I got to spend it. I knew I had an hour every week, me in a room with the rabbi. I enjoyed it very much.
Mitch, I've so much enjoyed this journey. I want to thank you for bearing your soul and for opening your heart and making available your very busy schedule to always, always, always be there for me. To always be there for me, to allow me to, instead of me flying up in the sky, to preaching up in the sky, but to ground me and to bring me down, make it relevant as you ask me questions that never would have occurred to me, right? But when you ask me them, I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's a real good question, and we've got to talk about this and bringing the message from heaven down to earth. Mitch, I want to thank you for helping me through this incredible journey, and I'm excited for the next step, the next frontier in our journey, as our friends are encouraged to follow us on Facebook. Follow us at facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. That's facebook.com/Jewish Gardens. And subscribe to us with a big red subscribe button at youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. That's youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. Don't go away. We'll be right back with the Rabbi and Rebbitzin right after this. Okay.
So
Friends, I'm going to close this feed.
signing off.
I'm going to close this feed. Say goodbye to Mitch. I'm going to close this feed. We're going to be right back with more Rabbi and Rebbitzin right after this. Don't go away.